Hello, and welcome to the Never Ending Experiment. This is Kim Anderson. What I want to talk about today is the New Age. Now, the New Age is old enough that we maybe shouldn't even be calling it the New Age, but I don't think there is any other word that's really taken over for what this cultural phenomenon is. And you could call it spirituality. It's kind of overlapping. A lot of times you'll see stores that say New Age and spirituality, New Age and crystals, things like that. But of course, these stores are just one part of something much larger, which I do think is really, really important. And there are definitely positives and negatives to this world. Now, the basis of the New Age, the reason why it was called that, I believe, comes from the idea of the age of Aquarius. And that's from astrology, obviously. If you look through history, you'll find that there are so many references to astrology. Astrology has been around for so long, and it has really defined a lot of human culture and how people have defined themselves. A lot of people were very aware of the astrological ages that they were living in, and they made references to those astrological associations. And so basically, the age of Aquarius is the end of this age of Pisces and the beginning of the age of Aquarius. So the age of Aquarius is really about the intellect, but the new age in particular, I believe, really has to do with disintegrating those old cults and cultures that were very much self enclosed. And it's about humanity as a whole being together. Now, the good thing about the New Age that I think is so important is that it is just spirituality in general. It isn't an organized religion. It's one of those things where people talk about it as though it's a cohesive ideology. It really, really isn't. You'll find people within the New Age that would be classified as New Age that don't agree with each other. People that criticize the New Age, even though they might be considered one of the New Age, kind of like what I'm doing. Because spirituality in general is just part of being human, and it encompasses a lot of different things. And the New Age also encompasses a lot of different things. It's basically like globalized spirituality where there's no particular culture. There's a lot of new ideas. Like I said, it's a new age, but it's also very, very old. It encompasses especially those parts of religion which are mystical in origin, Sufi in Islam, uh, the Kabbalah in Judaism. Like these were ways of thinking that were outside of the sort of organized religion, and they had a lot more to do with the individual experience and individual mystical experience. We're seeing this especially in the rise of psychedelic medicine, which is making a comeback, which I'm very happy about. And especially with globalization. I mean, this is the number one thing that is pushing the new age to get so big. I mean, I think it will be big enough that we probably won't even be calling it new age anymore and just spirituality in general, which I think is a positive direction because I think spirituality really is individual and it really is about your own inner experience. And although we can share sort of this energetic experience, we can meditate together, pray together, go through psychedelic experiences together. But in the end, it is your own inner experience. A lot of people will go to the New Age when they leave religion because they're trying to understand what the truth is about spirituality. And I believe the only way that you can do that is through your own personal experience. And that includes all different kinds of things. And that's why there are all different kinds of things within the New Age. Now, I grew up with New Age ideas all around me. I was raised Roman Catholic as well. I was exposed to a lot of different ideas when I was young, especially too because I had this disease and we didn't really know what it was. And once you get to the end of what the regular doctors can tell you, you start looking for other answers and you start looking at other practitioners and you start to see what else is out there. And there's a lot else that's out there. Emotional health and physical health and spirituality are really very, very much intertwined. So I think that's why it's important to get it right. But at the same time, it is about getting it right for you and for anybody. And when they say that you have to meet people where they're at, it's really true, because if you're dealing with inner experiences, you can't really dictate to anybody else what or how they should be practicing their own spirituality. It really isn't possible to do that. The best that you can do is just offer these tools. If you look through history, you'll find many, many, many esoteric and secret societies and strange rituals going on under the surface. A lot of people would go to their organized religion, synagogue, church, what have you, on the weekend, and then also have these secretive rituals and experiences outside of traditional religion. And depending on what religion you're in, some of those will vilify the esoteric side of things. A lot of traditional patriarchal religions will attack those, see them as witchcraft. If they're not exactly in line with what they think this traditional religion should be, they will often attack it. And I think that is because they're not really spiritual, right? They're not actually in touch with their own spirituality because they have externalized it so much. Although matriarchy isn't necessarily talked about all the time in the New Age, it is very strongly associated with feminism because it is open, because women are allowed to have spirituality. The goddesses are completely embraced, understood. The feminine is exalted. In your spirituality, your individuality is respected. I did an episode on astrology. I did an episode on the tarot cards. Those are just a couple of things that you'll run into if you start looking at the New Age. There's the idea of crystals. Crystals have been really maligned a lot by skeptics, which I think is really weird because it's actually one of the aspects of New Age that I think is actually the most scientifically testable. Liquid crystal display is a way that we use crystals in science. The ability to refract light is well known in prisms, and that's essentially what crystals do. And the reason why a lot of skeptics don't understand this kind of spirituality or this kind of healing is because it's subtle. Everything about this type of healing, energy healing, Reiki, is about subtle energy. So a lot of the people that practice these things, they also do Western medicine. They also will follow scientific medicine. It's just, what is the time and the place for both of those? It's meant to be felt. It's meant to be intuitive. And when you are following an intuitive path, it's very, very individual. And science doesn't lend itself well to individual anecdotes, right? But yet, if we were to look at it on a large scale, of course, you can measure that on a large scale. I've heard ridiculous things from skeptics, like the claims that crystals will cure cancer. I've heard of a lot of people talk about crystals. I've never, ever, ever heard anybody claim that crystals cure cancer. So this is one of those straw man arguments that skeptics use because they don't even take the time to investigate what it is they're saying. And there are a lot of, so-called snake oil salesmen within the New Age. There are crazy people. There are people that gone off the deep end. There are people who lie like anywhere else. I mean, that's the thing. When you're dealing with things that are at a subtle energetic level, of course, people can sell you something or overemphasize the effectiveness of certain different things. Like, no tarot card reader will deny that the tarot cards are right, right? They just might put it into context. Like, the future, you can still create your own future, even though the tarot cards are giving you a warning of what's coming, but nothing is set in stone, right? So they still have to make a living if they're making their living off of that. So, of course, they're not going to tell you that it doesn't work. But the fact is that it is very easy to overemphasize things that work. If you've seen it work a few times, you never know. But if you think about like a regular doctor, most of the time when you go to the doctor, you don't necessarily tell the doctor whether or not the treatment that they recommended to you worked or not. A lot of times, if it works, you just don't go back to the doctor. And if it's not your regular doctor, you may not go back to them ever. And so most of the things that doctors describe, they don't actually find out whether it worked, right? So the idea that that's sort of different with different practitioners that are doing different types of things, like Reiki, for example, you have to apply the same logic. You can't apply this logic unfairly when you're criticizing different types of practitioners who do different things. And even within those subtle energy types of activities, like let's use energy healing, right, as an example, because I've done energy healing. This is a very interesting one to look at because I do think some of them are scamming people. I do think that some of them are not genuine. They use energy healing not as healing, but as a game or as fun. And they can feel the influence they give to each other. They think that's cool, but they don't actually have the wisdom or the awareness or the education to know how to use it in a healing way. So I've had that experience. I've had the experience with those people who are maybe not genuine that are still doing these practices. I've also experienced very, very powerful energy healing, which was actually overwhelming. And this was someone who was very old, following along in a proven technique. And I just found that so interesting. So when people take it seriously, especially like this person was very old, that actually had an influence. So you can feel the energy. You can feel whether it's a genuine energy healing experience or not. So for me, it's been proven to work, but it's also impossible to tell from the outside, from a purely visual or material perspective, who's genuine and who isn't. And you have to take that into account. And that goes for so many other practitioners. You can call yourself a herbalist and you're just giving everyone wheatgrass and claiming that it cures everything, or like oatmeal. I mean, I've seen some pretty weird things that are really basic stuff that's like, okay, well, we know this is safe, so we can give it to you and you're probably not going to have a negative reaction. It's healthy. But it's not the same as those people that spend, decades of their lives studying different herbal traditions that actually have very advanced knowledge, ethnobotanical knowledge, as I've learned about. This is very, very scientific. There have been hundreds of studies done on herbal medicine. All of Western medicine is based on herbal medicine. I mean, it's just so arrogant and ridiculous to pretend that herbal medicine is lesser than other kinds of medicine. The only reason that it isn't used as much is because it's not patentable. There's been a lot of arrogance about that is completely unjustified. So the science is there if you're really into it. And there are scientific studies that have been done on energy medicine. They've been done on prayer. They've been done on all kinds of things that have shown some influence on your physical health. So that's kind of the health side of things. A lot of New Age stuff, when you get into spirituality, it's more about psychology. But again, these are overlapping fields. Our psychology does influence our physical health. Our physical health influences our psychology. These are feedback loops, right? Like all of these different parts of ourselves are feeding into each other and influencing each other. That's within the New Age as well. We'll find all kinds of weird little communities doing weird little things. And a lot of it is very creative. Most of them aren't necessarily following a tradition in a really pure sense. If you want to understand indigenous cultures and indigenous ceremonies, you have to go to that particular indigenous culture. And there are a lot of people selling these ideas as individuals, but they're not a part of it. So the New Age does have a lot of those kind of like, I guess, like fake subcultures where they've taken traditions that aren't theirs and incorporated them into something very new. And same thing with coca ceremonies, like most of them are not actually originating from Mayan culture and not actually being practiced by Mayans and not following any of the actual ceremonies from those cultures. That's one of the pitfalls in the New Age that you have to look for to understand that it's not necessarily authentic in a cultural sense. If you come at it from an anthropological sense, a lot of it will be pretty ridiculous. But in the end, it does come down to globalization. The fact is, a lot of people are completely colonized and completely globalized and have no traditions. You know, for me to search through my own ancestry to find those traditions, a lot of it is revived, a lot of it is neo, a lot of it is piecemeal. You have to piece it together because so much has been destroyed by the colonial religions. So I think in the end, like if you're gonna go into that, like I think it's worth it for people to just know what's there with that. Not everybody feels the need to do a spiritual experience. Not everybody feels the need to understand their lives better. But they're just tools, and you have to kind of take it for what it is and just use what's good for you and what works for you. And you don't have to shut down the whole thing or pretend that it's the same as religion. It's not the same as religion at all. It's kind of a pushback to religion. And it is about globalization. We are globalized now in a way that we've never been before. Um, and that can be stressful for people and that can be difficult for people. And it does lead to a lot of people who don't have a cultural grounding in their own ancestry. And that's why you go into that sort of world to try to find out what you need for you. And a lot of people's problems now are new, that you won't find traditions that deal with addiction to AI. Like these are things that didn't exist in the past. So, you know, that's why today you're going to find creativity, you're going to find different kinds of psychotherapy. And I have found that the therapies that have a more spiritual perspective have been better. I tried past life regression and I thought it was great. I thought it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. And I would recommend it to people, but I would also recommend that you find a really good practitioner because I think some people do it with ignorance. And it's the same with anything, including astrology. If you go to an astrologer and they talk about your love life purely in the terms of your sun sign, they're not authentic, they're not educated. So it's very hard to control and to understand that world, and you kind of have to do it with your own ability to like recognize what's good for you. Not everybody does that. But that's one of the ways that you learn that is by using your intuition, by trying things and recognizing if it's not for you. You don't want to get sucked into one of those weird little cults, especially if they're just going to take advantage of you. And there's certainly a lot of people that do that. I've talked to intuitives or whatever that are charging like $600 an hour, and I'm like, okay, well, that's clearly not worth it, especially for something that you may not even be able to prove. So I think that spirituality in general does need to be open. It does need to be shared. But I think if you're coming from a specific cultural tradition, I think you need to understand the majority of the world is not like you. The majority of the world is colonized. The majority of the world is patriarchized. It is separated from their ancient traditions. So if you have one of those lineages, I think they do need to be protected. And you do need to be aware that other people are going to step on those boundaries a lot because they've been raised without boundaries. And part of the new age is that there are no boundaries in there. And that can be dangerous, but also that's a pretty good reflection for exactly what the world is. That's exactly what it's like out there. It's not that easy to determine like what's right and what's wrong, what's effective, what's ineffective. And I don't take seriously those people who go into that, don't try anything and say that it's all wrong. You will never figure this out based on theory. You can only base it on experience. If you don't want to try it and you don't want the experience, then you need to shut up about it. It's pretty much that simple. So I don't take it seriously either when people believe that it's they figured out everything and they have it all right and their theories are perfect, because now you're looking at a guru who could be very dangerous, and that's very arrogant. So I think you need a lot of humility, and you need a lot of experience, and you need a lot of education. There are libraries full of books about spirituality. And this is what's so toxic about religion, is that they take one book and they make it everything. But what you need is a library. Every time you read a good book, you need to read another book and another book and another book and another book. And there's books being written all the time. The spirituality section of any bookstore or library is going to be massive, because so many people go through spiritual experiences and then they write about it. And so if you're interested in that at all, then you need to understand it. And if you're not interested in it, I don't believe in pushing people to do things that they're not comfortable with. If you don't need it, maybe you don't. It's one of those things, like life experiences can draw you in or without it. And a lot of people end up in those bookstores precisely because weird coincidences were happening to them. Things were pushing them a certain way, and they ended up in that bookstore, not sure why they're there, and finding something that could give them a lot of answers. That's definitely happened to me. This is Kim Anderson. This has been the Never Ending Experiment. I'll see you in a couple weeks.